A female CEO pretended to be poor for one day. A single dad shared his last meal with her. What if the woman everyone ignored on the street wasn't homeless at all, but the powerful CEO of a billion-dollar empire searching for one honest heart? And what if the struggling single dad who quietly shared his very last meal with her had no idea that one simple act of kindness was about to change his life forever? This isn't just a story about wealth and poverty. It's a story about dignity, compassion, second chances, and the extraordinary power of choosing kindness when you have almost nothing left to give. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another heartfelt story. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories that inspire hope, grace, and redemption to people around the world. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's return to Nathan Brooks and discover how one ordinary meal became the beginning of an unforgettable miracle. The woman sitting alone on the cold sidewalk looked like someone the world had already forgotten, but before this day was over, one quiet act of kindness would leave an entire boardroom speechless. The late autumn wind drifted through the streets of Cedar Ridge, Colorado, carrying dry maple leaves across the cracked pavement as commuters hurried toward warm offices and busy schedules. Most people kept their eyes fixed on glowing phone screens or steaming coffee cups, careful not to notice the woman resting against the brick wall outside a neighborhood grocery store. She wore a faded gray hoodie beneath an oversized brown coat that looked years too old, and a knitted beanie covered most of her chestnut hair. A small backpack rested beside her feet, while a handwritten cardboard sign simply read, "Just hungry. God bless you." Hundreds walked past without slowing down. Some glanced for only a second before looking away. Others tightened their grip on shopping bags as though kindness had become something expensive. Claire Whitmore lowered her eyes each time another stranger ignored her. For the first time in nearly 15 years of leading one of America's fastest-growing companies, no one recognized the woman whose face regularly appeared on business magazine covers and financial news broadcasts. That had been exactly the point. 24 hours earlier, Claire had quietly left her penthouse apartment without security, assistance, or luxury vehicles. She had exchanged tailored suits for worn clothing and designer heels for weathered sneakers because she wanted to answer one question that no quarterly report could ever explain. How did ordinary people truly treat someone who appeared to have nothing? Across town, Nathan Brooks tightened the zipper of his faded work jacket before helping his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, climb into the passenger seat of his aging Ford F-150. The truck had crossed nearly 200,000 miles, and every new rattle reminded him that replacing it remained nothing more than a distant dream. The heater coughed warm air only when it felt generous, but Lily smiled anyway, hugging her backpack against her pink sweater. "Dad," she asked softly, "are we still having grilled cheese tonight?" Nathan forced a gentle smile, even though he already knew there wasn't enough bread left for both dinner and tomorrow's breakfast. "We'll figure something out," he replied with the calm confidence only loving parents seem able to invent. After finishing another exhausting shift at Miller's Auto Repair, Nathan counted the bills folded inside his wallet. $11.32. Enough for one simple meal, maybe two if they skipped dessert. He parked beside the grocery store, took Lily's hand, and together they walked beneath the soft glow of the evening lights. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery section while families filled shopping carts with more food than Nathan could remember buying in months. He quietly calculated every dollar before reaching for a discounted deli meal marked for quick sale. It was the only hot meal he could afford. As father and daughter stepped back outside carrying the small paper bag, Lily suddenly stopped walking. Her eyes settled on the woman sitting against the brick wall. Claire looked tired, cold, and invisible to everyone except a little girl whose heart had not yet learned to measure people by appearances. Lily tugged gently on her father's sleeve without saying a word. Nathan followed her gaze. He looked at the meal in his hand, then at the woman no one else seemed willing to see. For a long moment, the evening grew strangely quiet, as though even the wind had paused to witness the choice that would change all three of their lives forever. Nathan looked down at the warm deli container in his hands, then back at Claire. There was no dramatic speech, no hesitation that asked for recognition, only the quiet calculation of a father who had already spent the entire day choosing between necessities. Lily squeezed his hand and whispered, "Daddy, she looks really hungry." Nathan nodded almost imperceptibly. "She does." He walked toward Claire with slow, respectful steps, careful not to make her feel cornered or embarrassed. "Ma'am," he said gently, lowering himself just enough so they were nearly eye level. "My daughter and I were about to have dinner. We would be honored if you shared it with us." Claire blinked in surprise. Throughout the day, she had heard hurried apologies, uncomfortable excuses, and complete silence, but she had not heard the word honored. It settled into her heart with unexpected weight. She looked at the meal, then back at Nathan's weathered face. His work jacket carried faint stains from motor oil, and his hands showed years of repairing engines, yet his eyes held a quiet peace that no amount of money could purchase. "I cannot take your dinner," Claire replied softly. "You and your little girl need it more than I do." Nathan smiled with calm certainty. Food tastes better when nobody eats alone. Lily knelt beside Claire and carefully opened the small paper bag. Inside sat one hot turkey dinner, a plastic fork, and a single dinner roll wrapped in paper. The little girl looked at the contents, then without the slightest complaint broke the roll perfectly in half. "Now everybody gets some," she said proudly. Claire felt something tighten in her chest. She had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without emotion. She had spoken before thousands of investors without nervousness. Yet watching a child divide the last piece of bread she owned was somehow more overwhelming than any boardroom victory she had ever experienced. They settled onto a nearby bench beneath an old maple tree whose golden leaves drifted quietly onto the sidewalk. Cars rolled past in steady streams while the sky slowly faded into shades of orange and deep blue. Nathan carefully divided every bite into 3 equal portions, making certain Lily received enough before serving himself. Claire noticed that he quietly gave away part of his own portion without mentioning it. He assumed no one was paying attention. She noticed anyway. "Long day?" Nathan asked. Claire hesitated. Every instinct told her to invent a convincing story, but for reasons she could not explain, she found herself speaking honestly without revealing who she truly was. "I have spent years surrounded by people," she answered. "Today I wanted to know what it feels like to be invisible." Nathan looked toward the passing traffic before replying. "Sometimes people only see what they expect to see. They miss the person standing right in front of them." Lily nodded as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "Daddy says everybody has a story." Claire smiled for the first time that day, a genuine smile untouched by cameras or shareholders. "Your father sounds very wise." Lily giggled. "He says he just fixes cars." Nathan laughed quietly. "Mostly old trucks that refuse to quit." The conversation drifted naturally from favorite breakfasts to Colorado snowstorms, from school projects to the stubborn pickup truck waiting in the parking lot. Not once did Nathan ask Claire why she was homeless, whether she deserved help, or what mistakes had brought her there. He simply treated her like someone worth listening to. As darkness settled over Cedar Ridge, Claire realized the experiment she believed she was conducting had quietly become something entirely different. She had set out to measure kindness in strangers, but sitting beside an ordinary, single father and his remarkable daughter, she was beginning to measure the poverty hidden inside a life filled with unimaginable wealth. Nathan glanced at the old dashboard clock inside his pickup. It was almost 7:30, and Lily still had homework waiting at home. He stood slowly, brushed a few dry leaves from his jeans, and smiled at Claire. "We should probably head home before my daughter convinces herself that math homework disappears after sunset." Lily laughed and zipped up her little jacket. Before Nathan could turn toward the truck, Claire spoke quietly. "Thank you. Not just for the meal. Thank you for treating me like I mattered." Nathan paused for only a moment before answering. "Everyone matters. Sometimes people are simply too busy to remember." Those words lingered in Claire's mind as she watched the father and daughter climb into their weathered pickup. The engine hesitated twice before finally coming to life with a familiar rumble. Lily waved enthusiastically through the passenger window. Claire returned the wave, noticing how genuinely happy the little girl seemed despite owning so little. As the truck disappeared around the corner beneath rows of glowing streetlights, Claire remained on the sidewalk longer than she had planned. Her phone, hidden deep inside the worn backpack beside her, vibrated repeatedly. She already knew who was calling. Her executive assistant had likely spent the past several hours searching hospitals, hotels, and airports. Board members were undoubtedly demanding answers. Investors were probably speculating. Yet none of that felt urgent anymore. Across town, Nathan pulled into the gravel driveway beside a modest one-story house that had clearly seen better years. The white paint had faded under decades of Colorado winters, and the front porch leaned slightly to one side, but warm yellow light spilled gently through the living room window. It still felt like home. Lily hurried inside, carrying her school backpack, while Nathan stopped briefly to collect tomorrow's firewood from a small stack beside the garage. The detached garage was hardly more than an aging workshop with peeling paint and shelves filled with carefully organized tools collected over many years. Every wrench had its place. Every spare part had been saved because someday it might help another customer who could not afford something new. Nathan unlocked the side door, switched on the overhead light, and quietly inspected an old pickup truck belonging to a retired schoolteacher. The repair could wait until morning, but habit guided his hands. He checked the engine one last time before covering it with a protective cloth. Inside the house, Lily had already spread her homework across the kitchen table. Nathan placed 2 glasses of water beside them and sat down to help with fractions. They worked together patiently while an old radio played soft country music from the countertop. Between multiplication problems, Lily suddenly looked up. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think the lady found somewhere warm to sleep tonight?" Nathan folded his hands together before answering honestly. "I hope she did." Lily frowned thoughtfully. "Maybe tomorrow we can bring her my extra blanket." Nathan smiled, pride quietly shining behind tired eyes. "That sounds like a wonderful idea." Several miles away, Claire sat alone inside her rental car parked beneath the shadow of a closed library. She had changed out of the oversized coat, but she had not started the engine. Instead, she stared at a leather notebook where she had intended to record observations about human behavior. The page remained almost empty except for one sentence written carefully across the center. "The poorest man I met today gave away the only dinner he had without asking for anything in return." She read the words several times before closing the notebook. During countless leadership seminars, consultants had spoken endlessly about vision, influence, and corporate culture. Yet none of those expensive lessons had revealed what she had witnessed on a simple wooden bench outside a grocery store. Quiet dignity could never be manufactured inside a boardroom. It had to be lived when no one important was watching. Claire slowly reached for her phone at last. More than 60 missed calls filled the screen. She ignored every one except a single message she typed. To her assistant. "Cancel tomorrow's meetings. I need one more day." Then she looked out through the windshield toward the quiet neighborhoods beyond the downtown lights. Somewhere inside one of those modest homes, a father and his daughter believed they had simply shared dinner with a stranger. Neither of them could have imagined that before another sunrise, the invisible woman they had welcomed with open hearts would make a decision capable of changing every chapter of their future. Morning sunlight filtered through thin curtains as Nathan Brooks poured pancake batter onto a scratched cast iron griddle that had belonged to his late father. The smell of butter filled the small kitchen while Lily packed her lunch with careful hands, placing an apple beside a peanut butter sandwich she had helped make before school. Their morning routine was simple, predictable, and built on quiet habits that made difficult seasons feel a little less heavy. Nathan tied Lily's shoelaces before walking her to the old pickup, reminding her to be kind to everyone because, as he often said, you never know what burden another person is carrying. Lily smiled. "Like the lady from yesterday?" Nathan nodded. "Exactly like her." After dropping Lily at school, Nathan drove straight to Miller's Auto Repair, where the familiar scent of motor oil, rubber, and fresh coffee greeted him long before he unlocked the service bay. By 8 o'clock, the first customer had already arrived, an elderly widower named Mr. Henderson whose aging sedan had begun making a strange rattling sound. Nathan inspected the engine carefully, discovering that the repair would cost far less than the man feared. "You could replace more parts," Mr. Henderson admitted, "but I cannot afford much this month." Nathan wiped his hands on a clean shop towel and smiled. "You only need this one. No reason to charge you for work your car does not need." The older man thanked him repeatedly before driving away with visible relief. Nathan never noticed the dark blue crossover parked across the street. Inside, Claire Whitmore watched everything through the windshield without saying a word. She had arrived before sunrise wearing ordinary jeans, a navy sweatshirt, and a baseball cap that concealed her face. Today she was no longer pretending to be homeless, yet she remained determined to stay invisible. She wanted to discover whether the kindness she had witnessed the previous evening had been an unusual moment or simply the way Nathan lived every day. Hours passed quietly. A young college student came and worried about a flat tire and apologized because she could only pay part of the repair bill until her next paycheck. Nathan repaired the tire anyway and accepted exactly what she could afford without making her feel ashamed. Shortly afterward, a delivery driver rushed into the garage, anxious because his work van had stalled and every missed delivery meant less income for his family. Nathan rearranged his schedule, fixed the problem immediately, and refused the extra cash the grateful driver tried to press into his hand. "Just help somebody else when you get the chance," he said with an easy smile. Claire wrote each small moment inside the same leather notebook she had carried the day before. There were no cameras recording these acts, no reporters taking photographs, no social media audience waiting to applaud. Nathan simply moved from one customer to another with the same steady patience, speaking to everyone with equal respect regardless of what they drove or how much they could pay. Around noon, he stepped outside carrying a thermos of homemade soup and noticed an exhausted sanitation worker eating alone on the curb after a long morning shift. Without hesitation, Nathan walked over and offered half of his lunch, insisting that sharing made meals taste better. Claire lowered her notebook and watched the familiar words come to life once again. They were not a line spoken for a stranger the night before. They were a principle guiding every ordinary hour of his life. For years, she had believed leadership was measured by quarterly profits, expanding markets, and impressive presentations. Yet the humble mechanic standing beneath a weathered garage sign possessed a kind of influence that could never appear on any financial statement. As church bells echoed softly from a nearby neighborhood, Claire realized she was no longer observing an experiment. She was witnessing the quiet character of a man who remained exactly the same whether anyone important was watching or not. And for the first time in many years, the successful chief executive found herself wondering whether she had come to Cedar Ridge to evaluate the community, or whether heaven had quietly brought her there to learn from a single father whose greatest wealth could never be counted in dollars. The afternoon sun slipped behind gathering clouds as a cool breeze rolled through Cedar Ridge, carrying the unmistakable scent of approaching rain. Nathan had just finished replacing the brakes on an aging family sedan when he noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. Claire still wore simple clothes that blended easily into the quiet neighborhood, but today there was something different about her expression. The confidence she carried beneath her disguise had been replaced by visible exhaustion. She hesitated before walking toward the garage, almost as though she was unsure whether she deserved another conversation with the man who had already given her more kindness than she expected from an entire city. Nathan looked up from his toolbox and smiled with the same warmth he offered every customer. "Good to see you again," he said. "Have you had anything to eat today?" Claire answered with a gentle smile that avoided the question. "I have been walking for a while." Nathan understood immediately. He glanced toward the small refrigerator inside the office, already knowing there was almost nothing left. Payday was still 2 days away, and every dollar had already been planned for groceries, gasoline, and Lily's school supplies. Even so, he opened the refrigerator and found only a container holding the homemade vegetable soup he had planned to share with his daughter that evening. He stood quietly for several seconds before closing the door. Without saying a word about sacrifice, he grabbed his jacket instead. "Come with me," he said. Claire followed him down the sidewalk until they reached a small neighborhood pawn shop that had served the community for decades. Nathan reached into his pocket and slowly removed the only piece of jewelry he still carried every day. It was a simple gold wedding band with tiny scratches that reflected years of honest work and faithful love. Claire immediately recognized the quiet reverence in the way he held it. "You do not have to do this," she whispered. Nathan looked at the ring resting in his palm before answering with calm conviction. "Memories stay in the heart. Sometimes the things we hold on to can help someone else keep going." The shop owner examined the ring carefully before offering a modest amount. Nathan accepted without negotiation. Minutes later, he walked into the grocery store beside the pawn shop and returned carrying 2 warm meals, fresh bread, fruit, and a small carton of milk. Claire stared at the bags in disbelief. She knew exactly what the ring had cost him emotionally, even if the money itself had not been much. They sat together at a quiet picnic table in a nearby park while gentle rain began falling across the empty playground. Nathan handed Claire one of the meals as though the gesture required no explanation. "You should eat while it is still warm," he said. Claire could barely lift the fork. Every bite felt heavier than the last because she understood what had made this meal possible. She had spent years approving charitable donations worth millions of dollars with a single signature, yet none of those gifts had demanded personal sacrifice. The man sitting across from her had quietly surrendered one of the last physical reminders of his beloved wife to care for someone he believed was a stranger. Nathan noticed tears gathering in Claire's eyes and misunderstood them completely. "It is all right," he said gently. "Tomorrow always brings another chance." Claire lowered her head for a moment, unable to reveal the truth without ending everything she had come to learn. Deep inside, however, another decision had already been made. She would not allow this act of quiet dignity to disappear unnoticed. Before long, the entire city would discover that the greatest measure of a person's wealth had never been hidden inside a bank account, but inside the choices made when nobody expected anything in return. The next morning arrived with clear skies that seemed almost too peaceful for the quiet storm unfolding inside Claire Whitmore's heart. She drove past Miller's Auto Repair one final time before sunrise and watched Nathan unlock the garage exactly as he always did, coffee in one hand and a worn toolbox in the other. Nothing about his routine suggested that he expected life to reward him for his generosity. He simply greeted the morning with gratitude, switched on the lights, and prepared for another day of honest work. Claire remained inside her car for several minutes, knowing that if she stepped out now, she would not have the strength to continue the experiment. Instead, she quietly placed a small white envelope beneath the windshield wiper of Nathan's old pickup before driving away. Inside was only a handwritten note that read, "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists." There was no signature, no phone number, and no clue that connected the message to one of the most influential business leaders in the country. Nathan discovered the note during his lunch break. He read it twice before carefully folding it and slipping it into his wallet beside a faded family photograph of Lily and his late wife. He smiled to himself, grateful that the woman seemed safe, then returned to repairing a customer's truck without another thought. He believed that chapter of his life had quietly ended. Across the city, however, an entirely different world waited for Claire. As her luxury sedan entered the underground parking garage of Whitmore Holdings, security officers straightened immediately while executives gathered anxiously near the private elevator. The moment the doors opened, conversation stopped. Her executive assistant hurried forward carrying a stack of reports that had accumulated during her unexpected absence. Several board members looked relieved, while others appeared frustrated by 2 days of unanswered questions. Claire acknowledged each of them politely, but offered no explanation. She walked through the polished marble lobby with calm confidence, yet every reflection she caught in the glass reminded her of Nathan's weathered garage and the quiet dignity that no expensive building could imitate. During the emergency leadership meeting that followed, financial forecasts, expansion plans, and acquisition proposals filled the conference room screens. Normally, Claire would have guided every discussion with precision, but today her attention wandered. She remembered a little girl dividing a single dinner roll into 3 equal pieces. She remembered a mechanic refusing to overcharge an elderly customer. Most of all, she remembered a gold wedding band resting in the palm of a man who chose compassion over comfort without expecting anyone to notice. When the meeting finally ended, Claire remained alone in the boardroom overlooking the Denver skyline. She opened her leather notebook and slowly reread every observation she had written over the previous 2 days. One sentence stood above all the others. Character is revealed most clearly when there is nothing to gain. She closed the notebook, reached for the intercom, and asked her assistant to locate every available detail about Nathan Brooks. Not to reward him with charity, she quietly corrected herself, but to honor the kind of integrity that deserved to be seen. At that very moment, Nathan locked the garage for the evening, picked Lily up from school, and stopped at a small grocery store to buy fresh bread after receiving his paycheck. Life felt wonderfully ordinary again. He had no idea that somewhere across the city, the woman he believed had simply continued her journey had just begun arranging a meeting that would soon place his quiet life in front of people who measured success by wealth alone. And before another week had passed, they would all learn that the richest person in the room was not the one sitting at the head of the boardroom table. Nearly a week passed before anything unusual happened, and Nathan Brooks welcomed the ordinary rhythm of life as though it were a blessing. Each morning began before sunrise. Each afternoon ended with grease on his hands, and every evening belonged to Lily. The mysterious woman he had helped seemed like a quiet memory now, tucked away beside the handwritten note he still carried inside his wallet. Sometimes he wondered where she had gone, but he trusted that wherever life had taken her, she had found hope. On Thursday afternoon, while replacing the alternator on a delivery van, Nathan noticed a sharply dressed courier walking toward the garage carrying an elegant navy envelope. "Nathan Brooks?" the man asked politely. Nathan stood and wiped his hands with a clean shop towel. "That is me." The courier handed him the envelope with both hands. "You have been invited to a private meeting tomorrow morning. Attendance has been requested." Nathan looked down at the thick cream-colored paper embossed with a silver crest. The address belonged to Whitmore Holdings, one of the most respected corporations in the country. He frowned with genuine confusion. "There must be some mistake," he said quietly. The courier smiled. "I was instructed to tell you there is no mistake." After the man departed, Nathan opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a formal invitation requesting his presence at corporate headquarters at 10 o'clock the following morning. Transportation would be provided if necessary. No explanation followed. Only one sentence appeared at the bottom of the page. "Your presence is deeply appreciated." That evening, Nathan sat at the kitchen table turning the invitation over in his hands while Lily finished her homework. "Are you going?" she asked. Nathan chuckled softly. "I honestly do not know why anyone there would want to meet a mechanic." Lily smiled with the quiet confidence children sometimes possess. "Maybe somebody needs their car fixed." Nathan laughed, grateful for her innocent optimism. The next morning he put on the nicest clothes he owned, a neatly pressed blue button-down shirt, dark slacks, and the brown leather shoes he usually reserved for church. Before leaving, he paused beside a framed photograph of his late wife resting on the living room shelf. "Wish me luck," he whispered with a gentle smile before driving toward downtown Denver in his faithful old pickup. As the towering glass headquarters of Whitmore Holdings came into view, Nathan felt strangely out of place. Luxury vehicles filled the underground parking garage, and employees in tailored business suits moved confidently through polished marble hallways. His weathered pickup seemed almost invisible among the polished sedans. Inside the grand lobby, a receptionist greeted him warmly before escorting him toward a private elevator reserved for executive leadership. Nathan looked around uneasily at the soaring ceilings, modern artwork, and walls of glass that reflected the morning sunlight. Everything about the building spoke of extraordinary success, yet he could not imagine why he had been invited into this world. When the elevator doors finally opened on the executive floor, silence greeted him. Senior executives, department directors, and board members stood gathered outside an enormous conference room, their conversations fading the instant they saw him. Some smiled politely. Others looked at him with unmistakable curiosity. Nathan instinctively checked whether he had tracked grease onto the expensive carpet. Then the conference room doors opened slowly. At the far end of the room, standing before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, was a familiar woman wearing an elegant ivory suit instead of a faded brown coat. Claire Whitmore turned toward him with calm, eyes filled with gratitude. For one breathtaking moment, neither of them spoke. Nathan stared in disbelief as every executive in the room rose respectfully to their feet. Only then did he finally understand why the woman who had shared his last meal had carried herself with such quiet confidence, and why the kindness he believed had disappeared into an ordinary afternoon had quietly found its way into the highest office in the building. The conference room remained completely silent as Nathan stood near the entrance, unable to reconcile the woman before him with the one who had shared a simple meal beneath a maple tree only days earlier. Claire Whitmore stepped forward with a warm smile that carried none of the distance or authority people often associated with powerful executives. "Mr. Brooks," she said softly, "thank you for coming." Nathan shook his head in quiet disbelief. "You are the chief executive officer?" Claire nodded. "Yes, but when we first met, I wanted someone to see me as a person instead of a title." She turned toward the board members gathered around the polished conference table. "Ladies and gentlemen, I asked you here because I want you to meet the man who reminded me why this company exists." A large screen illuminated behind her, displaying security footage from outside the neighborhood grocery store. The room watched as countless strangers walked past without stopping. Then Nathan and Lily appeared carrying a small paper bag. Every executive saw the little girl break a dinner roll into equal pieces before handing part of it to a woman they believed had nothing. Another recording followed from a nearby business camera, showing Nathan returning the next day, sharing his lunch, and speaking with quiet respect instead of pity. Claire then placed her leather notebook on the conference table. "These are my observations from 48 hours spent living without wealth, recognition, or privilege," she explained. "I met hundreds of people. Most never looked at me. This man never looked away." She slowly opened the notebook and read aloud. "He repaired vehicles honestly even when customers could have been charged more. He shared food he could barely afford. He never asked about my past, never questioned whether I deserved compassion, and never expected gratitude. He simply believed kindness was the right thing to do." The room grew even quieter. Several executives lowered their eyes as though examining reports that no longer seemed important. Claire continued, her voice steady but deeply personal. "The greatest lesson of this experiment was not about poverty. It was about character. We spend enormous amounts of time measuring profit, productivity, and performance. Yet we rarely measure integrity when nobody is watching." She then revealed the final piece of the story. On the second day, Nathan quietly sold his wedding band so that someone he believed was a homeless stranger could have a warm meal. He never mentioned the sacrifice. "I only knew because I followed him." A collective breath seemed to leave the room at once. Nathan looked down instinctively, almost embarrassed that something so private had become known. Claire walked toward him and held out a small velvet box. "Before we discuss anything else," she said gently, "there is something that belongs to you." Nathan opened the box with trembling hands. Resting inside was his wedding band, polished until it reflected the morning light exactly as it had years before. His eyes filled with emotion as he carefully slipped it back onto his finger. "How did you?" he began quietly. Claire smiled. "Some things should never be lost when they represent love." She paused before looking around the room once more. "This company has celebrated remarkable achievements for many years, but today I believe we are witnessing something far greater than financial success. Today we are witnessing the quiet dignity of a father who proved that true wealth is measured by what we are willing to give away when we have almost nothing left." No one applauded. No one interrupted. In a room where billion-dollar decisions were made every week, every voice fell silent because every person present understood they had just witnessed a kind of greatness that could never be purchased, negotiated, or manufactured, only lived one ordinary act of kindness at a time. The silence lingered long after Claire finished speaking, not because anyone expected more words, but because no speech could improve upon the truth they had just witnessed. Nathan stood quietly with his restored wedding band resting once again on his finger, feeling as though the room had somehow become too large for someone as ordinary as himself. Claire stepped closer, holding a simple folder instead of another grand gesture. "Nathan," she said with genuine warmth, "I cannot repay your kindness because true kindness is never a transaction. But I can make certain that the values you live by continue changing lives." She handed him the folder. Inside was not a check for millions of dollars, nor a luxury home, nor anything designed to attract headlines. Instead, the first page outlined a fully funded college scholarship for Lily that would remain available no matter what path she chose after high school. The second page offered Nathan a leadership position overseeing Whitmore Holdings' new nationwide community outreach initiative, allowing him to continue operating his garage while helping the company build partnerships with local schools, veterans, family shelters, and neighborhood repair programs. Nathan read each page carefully before looking back at Claire. "This is far more than I deserve," he said quietly. Claire smiled and gently shook her head. You are still measuring worth by what you own. I am measuring it by who you are. Nathan closed the folder and paused for several thoughtful moments. I will gladly accept the scholarship for Lily, he replied. Every parent hopes their child has opportunities they never had. But if I accept the rest, it has to be for one reason only. I do not want people to remember my name. I want them to remember that simple kindness still matters. Claire nodded without hesitation. That is exactly why you are the right person. Around the conference table, executives who had spent years discussing market strategies found themselves speaking instead about mentorship, integrity, and service. Before the meeting ended, Claire announced the creation of the Brooks Initiative, a nationwide program encouraging employees to volunteer in their own communities, repair homes for struggling families, support local food banks, and invest time rather than simply writing checks. The program would carry one simple motto inspired by the man standing beside her. Nobody should have to eat alone. Several months later, life in Cedar Ridge looked remarkably familiar. Nathan still unlocked Miller's auto repair before sunrise. He still greeted customers by name. He still refused unnecessary repairs and still believed honesty was the best advertisement any business could have. The only difference was that every Friday afternoon, volunteers from Whitmore Holdings joined local residents to serve meals, repair vehicles for families in need, and offer practical help with quiet dignity instead of public recognition. Lily often helped organize donated school supplies, smiling every time another child left believing that kindness had found them at exactly the right moment. One cool autumn evening, Nathan locked the garage and watched the sunset paint the Colorado mountains with shades of gold and crimson. Claire arrived carrying 2 cups of hot coffee instead of executive reports. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the distant laughter of children playing nearby. Do you ever wish we had met differently? Claire asked softly. Nathan looked toward the quiet street where ordinary neighbors returned home after ordinary days. No, he answered with a peaceful smile. If you had introduced yourself as a chief executive officer, I probably would have admired your success. But because you arrived as a stranger who simply needed kindness, I had the privilege of meeting the person before I ever knew the title. Claire's eyes filled with quiet gratitude. She understood then that the greatest miracle had never been the revelation inside the boardroom or the opportunities that followed. It had been the simple decision of a father with almost nothing to share everything he could. And long after the headlines faded, the presentations ended, and the city moved on to other stories, people continued repeating the lesson that began with one shared meal. Because genuine dignity asks for no applause, true grace never demands recognition, and the smallest act of compassion, offered without expectation, can become the quiet beginning of a lifetime of redemption for everyone it touches.